The top 4 Ret Paladins are here, and they have interesting rotations. Look at these damage breakdowns and the cast logs. It seems like they're using Seal of the Crusader now. So what has changed in Season of Discovery? What's our new rotation? Has the gear, talents, runes shifted? Let's look at the gear first. This is your best in slot, but it's going to take you a lot of raids to get it. So this stuff is your pre-raid best in slot. Thankfully, they actually have a lot of overlap, so let's focus on that. These are the pieces that are the best use of your time to get. You're going to need to get them eventually anyways. Starting with this ring, Silverlane's Family Seal, you'll need to do Shadowfang Keep and fight this easy boss. As for the belt, Cobran's Grasp, it's from an early boss in Wailing Caverns. It drops near the entrance. Super easy to get to. You can buy boosts for either of these 2 items. I think all the stealth classes are able to solo it. As for the other pieces, any shoulders with 5 or more strength works great. None of the top 3 Rets actually have the best shoulders available. Kinda crazy. Tiger with 6 strength and 6 agi is the best in the game, but they're a ton of gold and they're very rarely on the auction house. Same deal with this cloak here, 4 strength, 4 agi. It's the best. This is tied with Sergeant's Cloak though, so if you PvP, you can just go get that. If you're broke and you hate PvP, you're gonna need to get different items in these. Just remember that 1 strength is worth about 2 agility, so if you can get a cloak that's like 4 strength, 3 agi, or just 5 strength or 6 strength and no agi, they're similarly good and it's no problem. As for your bracers, you can get Pugilist bracers. They're super expensive, but you'll use them forever. Jorgen's a very close substitute, and they're actually much cheaper. But if you're real broke, you can just buy these for the time being. Patterned Bronze bracers, they're 5 strength. It's 3 less than our Abyss, but they're pretty much free. The Epic gloves, you need to have done a BFD before to get them. And you gotta have these gloves first, but they're cheap, so it's whatever. You won't really get these completed before your first raid, but you can make it so you're set up to complete it right after. You go here to Ashenvale and talk to the dead guy. Use a Elixir of Coalesced Regret before you talk to him. Also make sure that you have 150 skill in leatherworking. He wants you to pet this fish in BFD, which is next to the second boss. It's impossible to miss it. He's huge. After your first BFD, you head to Radget and you talk to Nora. You have to give her a handful of shifting scales, 40 strange dust, 5 essence, 2 glimmering shards, and 5 gold. Then she gives you this necklace that keeps you safe from the crushing darkness under Kelris. You swim down, you loot the box. Finally, you take the box to this place in Hillsbrad Foothills, which lets you get a shard of the void. Super easy. Now you can make your gloves or the chest plate if that's the way you want to go. Back to the pre-raid Abyss. Thunderbro Ring is the final piece. It is also super expensive. You could substitute it with a 5 to 6 strength ring off the auction house that will be far cheaper. It's not a huge deal. The other best in slot pieces are from raids, so you will have to go to BFD quite a few times to grab all the other pieces while you finish up your set. You should try to get Varrigan's Fist before your first raid. It's of course not BIS, but it is pre-BIS, and it's nice how you can guaranteed get it. Let's look at the talents. These are the best ones if you want to do damage, but let's go over the reasons why. At the top of the ret tree, we get improved Blessing of Might. Might does stack with Battle Shout, even though they're very similar, so always take this. It's going to give you an extra 11 AP, which means you're going to hit for about 3 extra damage per swing with your weapon. Here's the AP to weapon damage formula in case you're curious. It's also going to make your Seal Command hit for about an extra 2 damage. Pretty nice. Benediction is skipped because it doesn't directly impact our DPS. In the next row, we have Improved Judgment, which is great. It's going to bring our Judgment CD from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. This means we'll get off 25% more Judgments. Improved Seal of the Crusader is our next pick. It's only actually used for Gamura, but the top 3 Paladins on Gamu all use this due to the extra armor Gamu has and the reduced DPS we deal prior to the shell breaking. Besides, you don't need Parry Chance or Benediction, so who cares about the others? Finally, we're going to get Crit Chance and Seal of Command in the final row. It sucks to skip out on Pursuit of Justice, that's a very fun talent, but we're going to have the boon, so move speed isn't a huge deal for our uptime. The runes are mostly common sense. We want Crusader Strike, Divine Storm, and Exorcism. These are the other options we have. A few people use Seal of the Martyr on Gamu, but it's not common or done by the best player. I wouldn't consider it personally. or any of these other runes if you want a DPS. The engine for our DPS is auto-attacking and activating Seal of Command procs, but we do that by using an ever so clever rotation. Anyways, back to the logs. Let's steal their rotations. Checking in on their Aquinas logs, we see they have the same rotation, all of them across the board. Judge first, because we're running in and we're not yet in melee range. Put your seal back up, because you just used it and you're still not in melee range. These are able to be used at the same time because although seal is on the GCD, Judgment isn't. Next, you're going to Crusader Strike into a Divine Storm. From here on out, the priority is different. Crusader Strike, then Divine Storm, and finally Judge into a new seal. If nothing else is up, we can use Exorcism. The reason for this priority, it's pretty simple. We use the biggest hitting moves first, pretty much always. Crusader Strike on its own actually doesn't hit the hardest, but it has a very low CD and it can proc Seal of Command. So it's very important that we use it a ton. It also activates Wind Fury procs, so it's a killer move. Next up would be a Divine Storm, and then into the Judgment and the Seal, just as before. The reason for the Seal after the Judgment is obvious. We want to have a Seal up, and the reason to do Divine Storm before Judgment is less obvious, but it's just that Divine Storm hits harder and it swings your weapon, so we're going to do it first. I love how spiky the Rep Pally's damage is with all these moves. Watch my friend global me with Seal of Command. It also has a bonus when your target is stunned. This is such a fun ability for PvP and raiding. You can even do this kind of stuff if you're in bad gear, and the same goes for PvE, honestly. None of the top 3 rets actually have full bis. It's kind of nuts. Looking at the number 1 guy, this is what he's missing out. Buzzlight is missing on 9 strength and 10 agi because he doesn't have these pieces yet. We can go over them real fast. Missing out on 1 strength and 4 agi here from the High Tide Choker. 6 agi and 1 strength from using Of the Bear instead of a high roll Tiger piece for the shoulders. 2 strength on the Bracers over Pugilist, and a whopping 5 from the ring choice using Seal of Rin instead of Thunderbrow Ring. Kinda sucks that there are so many BOEs that are meta right now. I'd prefer it if there was a rep way to get it, like out of dungeons, similar to how they had it in Wrath, but it is what it is. Here's another way you can increase your stats though, and it's a little less frustrating. There's a lot of consumes that are for us. You can use Rumsey to get a little health. Sadly, everything that's food just gives a little health right now, so you can ignore these if you just want to deal damage. The 2 potions to keep in mind are going to be Strength and Agi Elixirs. 8 agility is nearly 1% crit, and 8 strength is about a weapon DPS, so that's pretty good. If you're nuts, you can get scrolls instead. And if you were able to be Horde, you could have gotten these things, but Paladins aren't on Horde, so none of you guys are going to have access to that. Make sure you also bring boons to raid and have your world buffs for them. The Weapon Stone is something that you sadly should never use. It will mess with your Wind Fury. Please don't put a Weapon Stone on. Not all Alliance players are familiar with this mechanic. If you have a lot of attention, you can also use Engineering. But it's very easy to lower your DPS when you try to use Engineering, so don't focus on it too hard. It'll screw you up. And then the final consumes are the actual combat potions. We don't have anything that's too cool. You can use a free action potions, that way you don't get stunned on Lady, or you can avoid chains on Kelris, shadow protection on Kelris, or Akumai. There's a couple places you can use potions. Probably you'll use mana potions most of the time, so that way you don't have to drink before bosses when you're moving from trash to a boss. And then the only other way that we can get more stats, or I should say, do more damage besides our gameplay, is what buffs are taken into the raid. Here they are. There's a lot of classes that help us out. We got Hunters, Locks, Feral Druids, Priests, and the Brown Paladin. You'll get these buffs from them. Hunters is Kings, basically. No Pallies are taking Kings right now, as I bet you know. Locks are for the debuff. Priest has Homunculi, which is awesome. It does the Warrior debuffs, but it's going to be up a lot more reliably than a Sunder Armor, so that's why we like it. Warrior has Battle Shout, so we get another Blessing of Might, basically. That's killer. And then Feral Druids, they got Wind Fury, stats from Mark, but we don't get Fairy Fire yet. They need a talent to cast it in form, otherwise they gotta pop out of form, and that's terrible for a cat DPS. Anyways, back to the buffs. You may be wondering how much each of these effects matters, and it's a little hard to say, but every 14 AP you get is basically gonna make your auto attacks hit for 3 more, and most of your abilities hit for 2 more. The reason I say that is because Seal of Command literally hits for like 2/3 of your auto, so that's like a direct translation. And, well, Crusader Strike basically does too. See, it's like 75%, so that's kind of how AP affects your class as a rep pally. You might be wondering how the armor pen type stuff affects you as a rep pally. And here's the equation for it, but this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to you most likely. The big points to keep in mind are armor counts for more when it's really low, and armor counts for a nearly constant value when you're near the cap on it. And basically what this means is if you don't have Curse of Wreck, you'll hit about 5% lower on a boss. If you don't have any armor pen, you're going to hit about 40% lower on a boss. So armor pen is really important, but it's not so important right now that we need all the debuffs. It's okay to not have Fairy Fire up on the boss, even though it would be more negative armor. The reason for this is the bosses are 2 levels above us, so they actually have less armor relative to us than they normally would. And for those of you who are really serious, these are some tricks you can use on the bosses themselves. This first one, I don't know why everybody isn't doing it, but on Aquinas, the fight doesn't have the ability to start until you have all of his little elemental buddies dead. So you can have the whole squad post up right where he's going to spawn, have a ranged finish off that Ellie, and you're just going to get a ton more uptime. There's people killing this boss in 20 seconds, so if you have to take 4 seconds to run in, like, there's your parse, you're just screwed. Start here, right next to the guy, kill his friend, start the fight, easy parse, there you go. Now for Gamu, there's also some tech here we can use that's not used by most people. Basically, you're just going to have Seal the Crusader up on pull, put your little debuff, and then go to your normal rotation that you do on every other boss. This is going to enhance your DPS just a little bit because this guy takes less damage before the shield is up, and he has higher armor than the other bosses. That's why you don't do it on every boss, but you can do it on Gamu. Get a little bit ahead of other people. Then on Lady, everybody does this. Well, not actually. You should at least, though. You free action potion when the cold hits the ground. That way you can stand in it, and it won't give you stacks. Normally, if you stand in it, you know, you get to 5 stacks, then you get stunned. You get turned to a popsicle like this, and that's going to screw your DPS. So take the free action potion, sit in the cold, hit the boss. Awesome. Gelihast, there's not really anything too special about this guy. You could try to get cute with your cleave if you're anywhere near the ads in the final phase, but the only real chance, in my opinion, you have to optimize here is when the boss is immune during the March phase, you can put up your debuff from Seal of the Crusader, just like on some other fights. It'll just give you a tiny little bit of extra damage. You have nothing else you can do during that time anyway, so go ahead. Then, after that, you're going to be on Lorgus. This fight, it's another one where you can do the Seal of the Crusader thing if you want, because you're able to target him as he's running out through this portal, and you can smack him with it right on the start for pull and then get on with your regular rotation, but you really don't got to. You can just do a regular rotation on Lorgus. Kelris, sadly, there's not any real great technology here unless you have a lot of control over your raid group. If you do, you can make it so that way there are 4 people closer to the boss than you at all times, so that way you don't get sent to the Shadow Realm and you can just hit the boss and parse. Sorry, it's a kind of a lame boss because of this. And then the last one is Akumai. On this, real easy optimizations. Make sure that your Divine Storm is going to line up with ads that get spawned to cleanse the debuff from your tank. Obviously, getting this cleave off on a few more people can add a decent amount of damage to yourself. And also, when Akumai becomes immune for short periods of time, when he does that little transition to the Shadow phase, you could put up your Seal of the Crusader debuff. Not everyone's doing it. I don't think the highest parse in the world's even doing it. But you could. It would add just a little bit of damage. Subscribe.